see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue.
Welcome to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, powered by Jack's Angels, where we talk about your experiences, advocacy news, research, and today's heroes for kids. We are here to bring hope to the unthinkable but real experience of a child diagnosed with cancer. Jack's Angels' advocacy mission is to provide a voice for children with cancer to effect change for a more hopeful future for those to come. Childhood Cancer Talk Radio starts right now. Here is your host, Janet Demeter.
Welcome to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure on TogiNet.com. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, and we are a new show to the airwaves in 2016 dedicated to raising awareness for childhood cancer and as a forum for discussion on a variety of topics, all with the aim of giving our kids with cancer, their families, advocates, medical caregivers, and researchers a stronger voice. I'm Janet Demeter again, and today's show, which is the last of this September 2016 Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, will take a brief look at some of the activities of the month and progress in advocacy for children with cancer over the last year during our advocacy report. Our special guest joining us today is Raphael Rousseau MD, PhD, the global franchise head of the innovative Pediatric Drug Development Group at Genentech. Briefly about Genentech. Founded 40 years ago, it's a leading biotechnology company that discovers, develops, manufactures, and commercializes medicines to treat patients with serious or life-threatening medical conditions. Considered the founder of the industry, the company, and a member of the Roche Group, has headquarters in South San Francisco, California. And Genentech has been delivering on the promise of biotechnology for these 40 years and oversees Roche's pediatric strategy and ensures optimized implementation of pediatric clinical development plans across the company's oncology portfolio. Genentech became a member of the Roche Group in March of 2009, and as part of their merger agreement, Roche and Genentech combined their pharmaceutical operations in the United States. So Genentech's South San Francisco campus now serves as the headquarters for Roche pharmaceutical operations in the United States. So prior to joining Roche in 2009, Dr. Raphael Rousseau was professor of medical and pediatric oncology at the University Claude Bernard in Lyon, France. There he established a clinical and translational research program and became an expert for biomedical research within France's Agency for the Safety of Medicinal Products, a recipient of the European Union's Marie Curie reintegration grant in 2005. Raphael is the lead author of several seminal publications in childhood neuroblastomas and leukemias, and was awarded the 2008 Cancer Foundation Advanced Clinical Research Award in Sarcoma from the American Society of Clinical Oncology for his translational research project in pediatric osteosarcoma, a bone tumor, using nanoparticles targeting tumor blood vessels, which sounds very interesting. Dr. Rousseau is Childhood Cancer Talk Radio's Hero of the Week for his outspoken support of systemic reform in pediatric cancer research and his call for parents, patients, advocates, researchers, and clinicians to work together for this change. Dr. Rousseau, welcome to the show. It's truly an honor to have you with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Janet, and thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. So, Doctor, did you find yourself drawn to medicine early on in your life? And was there any particular event or occasion that made you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, as a matter of fact, I came pretty late to medicine as a high school student. But since then, I really have had a passion for medicine and pediatrics in particular. And so since then, I really wanted to tackle the most difficult to treat diseases, and cancer, of course, is one of them, even though we've made a lot of progress and have a lot of successes. So, yes, it's been a drive since now almost 20 years.
Right. Well, we know that there have been few medicines specifically derived for children over the past 30 years. And so news of what Genentech is doing is certainly music to many of our parents' ears, I'm sure.
Yes, well, they came from the realization as an academic researchers that it was very difficult to get a hold of those promising medicines being developed in pharmaceutical companies for adults. And so I thought that the best way to be an advocate for the cause of children with cancer was to move to what we call the dark side of the force, which actually is pretty enlightened, and set an example. And Genentech and Roche for that have been really an amazing place to work at with strong leaders helping us to move the needle on behalf of children with cancer.
Excellent. Well, it's the whole reason I first tried to be in touch with Genentech was because I was hearing so many good things from other parents. And I've been trying to enlarge my awareness of pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies and what they do. And interestingly enough, I went to, and I've put this on the show before, we had a show it was like 6-7 weeks ago at the Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute with Dr. Keller. And among there were 3 groups of us working on different projects, and the one we were assigned to was alveolar soft part sarcoma. And there was a gentleman there named Nathan Troller who spoke very highly of you, and I thought it was wonderful that when I contacted Genentech and asked, if I could speak with someone there about pediatrics, that they referred you. So in a roundabout kind of way, it's really nice.
Yeah, that's very kind of Nathan. I mean, his family went through some very difficult times, and we try to help as much as we can. And actually, their story is really a driver for what we're doing now, which is one of the things that we're doing now, which is really to provide access as early as possible to children with cancer, and particularly to adolescents. Usually, those patients have a worse outcome than children in general. And the tumor types that they have do not match the one that adults have. And so it's very difficult to find adequate clinical trials for these adolescents and young adults. So what we're doing at Roche Genentech now is to increase the age of accrual in our clinical trials so that adolescents and young adults with pediatric types of tumor can access our pediatric trials, which are usually limited to children below the age of 18. So we're raising the age of inclusion up to 30 years of age, and we can even go beyond. I've had patients in their 70s with relapsed neuroblastoma, so that's rare. But that can happen, and so we have to be equipped for that. And also working with our adult development colleagues so that they can consider lowering the age of inclusion to 12 years and above in their adult type of tumor trials, so that the very few but nonetheless existing children with adult-type tumors can have access to innovative medicines as early as possibly can. So this is something that's very strongly supported by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sandra Horning, who at the time she was the president of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, had started this adolescent and young adult, the so-called AYA initiative. And so we're trying to implement that as much as possibly can in our clinical trials. But again, this was really initiated with the story of the Troller family and our discussion with them.
Wow, that's wonderful. That was a particularly difficult cancer to treat, no? Alveolar soft part sarcoma, or ASPS?
Yes, indeed. It's one of those rare tumors for which there's not many therapeutic options. It's so rare that it's very difficult to generate medicine specifically tailored for that disease. Now, the good thing out of the Troller family sad story, is that now the NCI and Genentech are teaming up to open a clinical trial specifically dedicated to SPS with one of our medicines. So, even with sad stories, we can make the best out of it, and I think this is a true example of a strong collaboration and discussion between patients advocates, academics, regulatory agencies, and industry.
That's fantastic. And just to know, to listeners to speak to your researchers and your doctors and the companies in charge of this work, and also, regulatory agencies and your lawmakers too. It does make a difference. I can't stress that enough. And what I loved about, I read one of your articles at www.gene.com, everyone, for more about Genentech, GENE.com. I love how, sorry, I just got sidetracked. I was so excited about telling everybody about it. I'm sorry, I lost my thought. I'm becoming, I think I'm having early Alzheimer's disease. But okay.
You were talking about lawmakers and the and the discussions between all the stakeholders.
Yes, thank you. It's so important that you realize your voice is powerful and that people do care. These agencies and these institutions are made up of people. Okay? Bottom line, the only way that we're going to make changes in our system, which looks like this huge machine that's impossible to address, it's through working with people. And that's what I loved about your article, is that you really stress that, like in 2 or 3 different places, that this is a we problem, that we have to do this together.
Well, exactly. I think it's about also reassuring and building trust among the different stakeholders. Industry is, and that's particularly true for Genentech and Roche, is a place where we generate research, but ultimately the goal is to treat patients. And yes, there is a commercial endeavor to what industry is doing, and that's what then feeding our R&D is and paying for our research. But for children, it's not a commercial issue. So it's really about making what's right for children, doing now what children need next. And so, using the good of what industry has, which is this tremendous scientific and high-quality medicine production facility to do what's good for children. So we can do that, and many companies actually are doing it. It's just that we're probably the one that has the most structured team specifically dedicated for pediatric cancers. But many companies are trying to do the right thing. It's about gathering the knowledge, the willingness, and collaborating with our external partners.
And we're going to take a quick break. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, encouraging you to stay tuned. Quick break for our TogiNet sponsors.
Stay tuned. Janet will be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
By the time this show is over, you'll blink at least 30 times. The average person normally blinks about 20 times per minute, or 17,000 times a day. A faster rate usually indicates anxiety or emotional stress. What's the word for someone who blinks a lot? A squintifigo. FBI agents have identified a specific type of blink that they directly associate with gamma staying. That's a person who tends toward deception and fraud. Attorneys, also known as pettifoggers, look for blinking when they have people on the stand. The eyelash flutter means they really do not like the question at all. Women blink more than men, but when a man blinks at a woman, he always appreciates a wink back. What's another word for flirting? Hazoku.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
Information about book publishing is power. The power to change your authoring life, and the power to change the lives of your readers. So join us for Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. You'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now. As the book shepherd, Dr. Judith Briles is in. And each week, she will include publishing professionals that will reveal tips and secrets to the author's journey. If there is a book in you want to listen, learn, and yes, call in with your questions each week. For more on Judith and what she can do for you, check out her website, thebookshepherd.com. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know, but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by Author You and The Book Shepherd, with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.
You'll always
more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Welcome back to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio and our conversation with Dr. Raphael Rousseau, the global franchise head of the innovative Pediatric Drug Development Group at Genentech, featured today for its support of the development of therapies for children with cancer. And Dr. Rousseau, enjoying so much our conversation. Before the break, we were discussing, the growing involvement in industry in helping find solutions to developing therapies for children. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about a really innovative program that Genentech is leading with that hopefully will kind of change the way we do things. Could you tell us a little bit about iMATRIX?
So the iMATRIX program
iMATRIX.
is an innovative clinical trial platform that we have started now a year and a half ago with two of our medicines. Following our observation that children with cancer did not have access early enough to innovative medicine. Usually, many companies, for lack, I think, of understanding of the pediatric challenges and the fact that they often don't have pediatricians on board, start when they are obliged to developing new medicines for children with cancer very late in the life of the medicine. That is usually once the medicine is approved for adults. And we felt that it really did not make sense, that it was not fair for children. And, a number of parents are asking for compassionate use access for their child. And even though this is a mechanism that we can use for children in providing them access with our medicines, we feel that it's better for them and for the community that those children be treated under good clinical practices in clinical trials. So this clinical trial platform offers access to children with several types of tumors, depending on the mechanism of action of the medicine, and tries to match the mechanism of action of this medicine, as far as we know it, with the molecular characteristic of the patient's tumor. So meaning that we're not restricting ourselves to tumor types in children that also exist in adults, which is what the regulation asks us to do, ask industry to do, but we widen to all tumors where it scientifically makes sense. So multiple tumor types and multiple medicines as well. So we offer currently access to two of our innovative medicine, but the plan is as soon as we have phase 1 data showing safety in adults, to bring those new medicines into the iMATRIX trial. And so ultimately, all the medicines available in the Roche Genentech portfolio should be made available, provided that it makes sense in children. And so we're now building the capacity to offer this across industry portfolio by sharing the concept with other companies. We're working very closely with the FDA and its counterpart in Europe, the EMEA, to make this platform, the protocols, the guidelines, what we call the response gates, all the tools necessary to run a clinical trial to other sponsors, including academic and industry. So we've tested two medicines, as I said, and across different tumor types. And without going into too many details, what I want to say is that the support from the community has been tremendous. 75 children have participated to this clinical trial, so it's a phase 1, phase 2 for one of our medicine, and in less than 8 months. And you probably know that clinical trials in children with cancer usually take years. Here, in less than a year, we've been able to test the medicine in a good number of children across a number of tumor types. And again, it's too early to talk about results, but at least I think what I want to say is that an adequate, tailored clinical trial platform for children with cancer is possible, and we're willing to expand this concept to any other company who would want to put its medicine onto this platform. So it's really an era of pre-competitive assessment. There's no reason to compete between companies. Those diseases are rare. And so what's the point of trying so many different medicines in so few patients when we could collaborate and work together as an industry with academic partners, parents, and the health authorities to make sure that those medicines are available as soon as possible and are assessed as quickly and safely as possible.
That's amazing, because it's such a huge, broad problem that we've had. Kids just, basically, they'd be asking for compassionate use, sometimes on a drug that was never conceived for them. And they're usually reaching out for things because nothing's being developed for them. And now here's an opportunity to start with the horse instead of the cart, so to speak.
Exactly.
For kids. That's great.
Exactly. So the point is that for now we want to make sure that those medicines that are primarily developed for adults rapidly find their way for children without having to wait for years and generating so much frustration with parents and their families having to go through compassionate use. So making those medicines available through adequate clinical trials. Ultimately, my vision is that by building this framework that is safe and efficacious for children, and also cost-effective, because this is expensive to do that, and big companies can do it, but smaller companies that may have some fantastic medicines in their portfolio may not be able to do that. So that by setting up this circle of virtue, where we can really show that we can do things fast and cost-effectively for the benefit of children, we can then generate the environment to foster research and drug development specifically tailored to children's needs. Again, currently we're adapting medicines that have been developed in adults and may very well work in children. But there are some specific characteristics of pediatric tumors that would deserve specific development that may not be applicable to adults. Some medicines are available, but not enough. And so this is what we're trying to do, is to set up this circle of virtue so that ultimately we could have a seamless drug development process tailored specifically to the needs of children with cancer.
It's amazing. A circle of virtue. Question. You're doing some adapting of medicines in adults. Are the two medicines that you're speaking of therapies that were developed specifically for children in mind, children's tumors?
Not specifically. Those are molecularly targeted or immunologically targeted medicines. And so they were initially designed to target specific cancer pathways, either immune system or cell cycle pathways. But that's our point as pediatric researchers, that the mechanisms that induce cancer in adults are very often the same in children. And so there's absolutely no reason not to develop also those medicines in children when their tumors share the same molecular determinants, the same pathways. And this is what has been the problem, I think, with the U.S. and European laws, pediatric regulation, is that the requirement for companies is to develop a medicine in children when the disease that is targeted in adults also exists in children. Well, I think all of your listeners will agree with me that pediatric tumors have usually nothing to do with adult tumors. There is no breast cancer, very few colon cancer, no prostate cancer in children. There are leukemias, there are some brain tumors, but neuroblastomas, osteosarcomas, rhabdomyosarcomas, and so forth do not exist in adults. And so therefore, there was no incentives nor obligation for pharmaceutical companies to expand the development of their medicines into the pediatric arena. And so this is what Genentech and Roche has been now saying for many years, and that FDA and its counterpart in Europe are now applying, is it should not be about equivalent names of tumors. It should be about the mechanism of action of the medicine and the molecular pathways in the tumor. And it could be a pediatric tumor, but if the pathway, if the underlying biology is the same as in adults, then the medicine must be developed in children. And that's what we've been saying, and people are listening, and this is what we're doing now.
What do you think of the Race for Children Act with Kids v. Cancer? Have you heard of it?
Yes, of course, we work very closely with Nancy Goodman. I think anything that can be done to implement this notion of mechanism of action as opposed to names of tumor is the right thing to do. It has to be driven by science. And, it may be painful to hear by some of my colleagues in industry because it will put more obligation, but it's the right thing to do. It's our societal and moral obligation as physicians, wherever we work, in industry, in academic labs, in public offices, to do what's right for kids. And so, yes, it's going to put more constraints on us, more obligation to do the right thing, but that's the right thing to do, isn't it?
Of course, it's primarily the industry is created to help people. It's a trend, I think, in many different industries for money to come first, and this is where one is just not acceptable. So, not that anyone should go broke over this, but I don't think anyone will. I think it's just a matter of rearranging, doing some rearranging.
Exactly. No, I think again, talking about the circle of virtue, there are incentives in the law. And there are ways to run those clinical investigations in a way that is cost effective while remaining safe. And so I have no doubt that at some point people will realize that the efforts and the investment are worth it. And the best thing is seeing those patients ultimately survive, and that has no price.
Absolutely. No, and that's the whole point. And oh my gosh, someone might be closer to curing cancer. It's time for a break for commercial messages from our sponsors at TogiNet.com. I'm Janet Demeter, your host for Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, and we have the unique opportunity today to visit one of the world's foremost researchers in pediatric oncology, Dr. Raphael Rousseau, who leads the development of the innovative Pediatric Oncology Drug Development Team, or iPODD, at Genentech, a group of 25 people dedicated to evaluating investigational medicines for pediatric indications. Don't go away.
Stay tuned. Janet will be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
The League of Women Voters reminds you that on Election Day, we are all equal. Please join your friends and neighbors by registering to vote and going to the polls November 8th. Visit www.vote411.org to find out who will be on your ballot and how the voting process works in your community. This election is about our future, and we all need to weigh in.
If you could live your life truly standing in a place of peace, joy, and abundance, wouldn't that make your heart soar? Now you can, with Lessons in Joyful Living, with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi, Mondays at noon Central. Kimberly Rinaldi, having created a highly successful coaching practice, now teaches Lessons in Joyful Living. She believes in empowering others and that through it, you have the ability to break through any and all barriers, thus allowing you to reach your greatest potential and joyfully step into your life's purpose. What used to take weeks, months, or even years, she can now teach you in a matter of hours with her programs. For more on Kim and her show, go to her website, KimberlyRinaldi.com. That's RINALDI.com. Then join us for Lessons in Joyful Living with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi.
Welcome back to more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Welcome back to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio. Great show for you today with Dr. Raphael Rousseau of Genentech's Innovative Pediatric Drug Development Group. This is the last Thursday of Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and though our more complete overview won't be until 1 week hence at least, I'll briefly let you know a few of the month's developments in Washington, D.C. The White House briefing on September 16th was a welcoming forum with primary speakers Dr. Danielle Carnival, Chief of Staff and Senior Policy Director of the White House Cancer Moonshot Task Force, who gave an overview of the moonshot as a call to action to private sector organizations and companies, research institutions, and individuals we all came forward in a very inspiring ways at the June summit. There was a brief report on that. And also joining us was Dr. Doug Lowy, Acting Director of the National Cancer Institute, who clarified that all types of pediatric cancer are being included in the NCI's Pediatric Match trial, originally hoped to begin at this time, but expected to begin in the first part of 2017. Co-funding of organizations with NCI was encouraged with enthusiasm and participation in the National Council of Research Advocates. It was still difficult to get a direct answer to the desire to prioritize NCI research grants for low survival rate cancers and young children, but we were assured that the Office of Advocacy Relations, consulting Amy Goldman, would be an open door, and access to consulting with Dr. Lowy personally would be the next possibility. And after my personal meeting with Patrick Mahoney from the Office of Advocacy Relations and his partner Lori Sinkin, I was strongly reassured of an ongoing advocacy relationship and open policy for the future with advocates, with parents of that office. The Office of Congressional Relations had actually supplied the language in the DIPG Awareness Resolution, which was a collaboration between Jack's Angels Foundation, Congressman Knight, Congresswoman Spear, Dr. Michelle Manji of Stanford University, and the Office of Congressional Relations, of course, calling for more consideration of those low survival rate cancers and years of life lost in the NCI research grant process. It is unlikely that this resolution will go through this year, but I was encouraged strongly for its reintroduction. And the summit for the Congressional Caucus was similarly hopeful, with a visit from Greg Simon, Executive Director of the Moonshot Initiative. He reminded us all that we are the moonshot as we move forward into a new administration, uncertain of its continuance therein. Congressman Michael McCall of Texas 10th District let us know directly that Fred Upton, chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, had promised, we'll see about that, right? But he had promised a vote on the STAR Act before the session is through. And of course, the STAR Act is our childhood cancer survivorship, treatment, access, and research program. That's a wonderful piece of legislation that many groups have been working on for a long time. Support for 21st Century Cures Act, Creating Hope Act, Race for Children Act, STAR Act were all underlined, with the exception, of course, of our awareness resolution discussed above. This is why I went to Washington, where I had a chance to speak for it, at least at the White House briefing, beautifully managed by Faye Jenks, by the way, of the White House Office of Science and Technology and Public Affairs. There was no public discourse at the caucus summit this year. Tomorrow's webinar for CAC2, which is Coalition Against Childhood Cancer, that's CAC2, involves David Aarons of the National Brain Tumor Society and the Blue Ribbon Panel for the Moonshot, as well as Peter Adamson, chair of Children's Oncology Group, also a member of the Blue Ribbon Panel. If you're not a member of Coalition Against Childhood Cancer, or rather CAC2, consider it as an individual organization. We're stronger together, and there are more opportunities to have a voice than you may have thought. To our listeners out there, I am speaking. So with no further ado, I'd like to return to our conversation with Dr. Rousseau, who leads the Innovative Pediatric Oncology Drug Development Team at Genentech, and I've been told that the website, isn't growing fast enough for the people that have joined this team. It's moved from 25 people to 61, an active part of the solution to the neglect of pediatric cancer in a medical research system, implementing some important changes as part of Genentech's increased focus on pediatric cancer. Dr. Rousseau, before the break, we were discussing some legislation and like the Race for Children, and again making provisions to make sure that pediatric cancers aren't lost in the loophole if there's not necessarily an adult correlative to the disease.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, the idea is really to make sure that we're driven by science and not regulations. And that's exactly where we're going now. Both the European and U.S. Health authorities are modifying or adapting their regulation to take science into account, the mechanism of action of the medicines and the molecular determinants of the pediatric tumors so as to match them and basically ultimately put ourselves in a situation where we can preserve and match those children with very rare tumors to the most promising therapies rather than, exposing so few patients to so many compounds, so many medicines. And I know this sounds a little bit provocative because for many parents, there hasn't been many possibilities to access those different medicines. But if you think about it, industry in the adult space is competing for large pools of patients with medicines of the same class. Do we need that in children where so few patients are concerned? That's too many. But to run clinical trials and to find answers to our scientific questions and safety questions, we really need to focus our efforts to the one or two compounds, to the one or two medicines that are the most promising. And so this is what the iMATRIX platform also aims at, is to be able to choose the best available medicines to those for those rare patients, rather than being unfocused and losing time. In essence, it takes many years to run clinical trials, and so we really need to make sure that we can have answers quickly.
Absolutely. It seems like saving time is the number one consideration, really, when dealing with pediatric cancers. I just wanted to share with you briefly at the Institute with Dr. Keller, one of the projects that it isn't shelved, but it's just kind of waiting, for more funding, is a really cool microchip technology that would basically help and be part of the whole. There's been a combination therapy work going on in the Children's Oncology Group around the world for brain tumors, especially resistant ones like really resistant ones like DIPG. And basically this little microchip, this little piece of tech would, over the course of a weekend, find the most probable combination of therapies to help that child. And I'm hopeful that it's smaller projects like this that are really out of the box thinking and really exciting scientifically that might get more notice with all of this collaboration. At least that's my hope.
Absolutely, and I think the promises of precision medicine or personalized healthcare should not be lost to the pediatric community. And so this is really something that many of us in the community are trying to tackle: is can we generate some preclinical evidence for the efficacy or lack thereof of our medicines, whether used as single agent, but most importantly as combination, because we all know that cancer is a war that's fought using several weapons, and so single agent drug development is not the answer. It's just a step. So any tool that can be used to better understand ahead of exposing children is going to be critical. That one caveat to this is those new promising medicines, so-called immune checkpoint inhibitors, or drugs that work on the immune system, are very difficult to modelize in preclinical models in animals because the human immune system is so complex that it's very difficult to test those medicines in animals. But many other compounds, many other medicines can be tested preclinically in microchips or in relevant animal models. And this is what we're putting together. That's part of my role at the in the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, is to help foster collaboration in the preclinical space. And so we've built an alliance in Europe that we're now importing in the United States. It's called the IMI2 consortium, where several companies are teaming up with several academic investigators who have relevant pediatric tumor preclinical models so that we can test our medicines as quickly as possible in those models to already establish some prioritization in terms of unmet medical needs. You were talking about the iPODD, that's certainly an urgency, and pick the best, most promising compounds from this preclinical evaluation. That doesn't mean that we're going to discard the other one, but at least we can prioritize our efforts. And so this is a joint effort between the European Commission, an industry consortium, and academic labs around the world. And I think that's certainly going to help also to better define and design our clinical trials for children with cancer.
Well, there was also a very strong presence at the White House briefing and at the summit of organizations that were very proactive with the use of animals and their data to help pediatric cancer.
No, exactly. I think this is an important effort, is the science that needs to feed upstream of our clinical trials. You know, we need solid science before we get patient onto clinical trials. That's true for adults, but that's also true for children. Now, this said, you know, we know quite a lot about the biology of those tumors, and, you know, as much as I think preclinical assessments are necessary, you know, in vivo veritas, in humans, I would say, and with the adequate environment, I think it is very important to rapidly get into clinical trials in patients, children, and adults. And you know, we can generate a lot of preclinical data, and some of it is critical. But we should also be careful that this should not slow us down. We need to be realistic. We need to be bold. We need to be fast. That doesn't mean that we want to take too much risks, but at the same time, you know, there's such an urgency for those patients that the risk-benefit assessment is critical as well. When you're dealing with a patient that has a survival rate of 0% at 2 years, I think, you know, you can't wait too long for testing those new medicines.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now we're dealing with so many new ways of, I talked about DIPG before, but they're now starting to access the tumor, and so direct positing of medicine, you better get one that has a good probability of being helpful, and they just don't know right now. So
exactly.
Quickly, you're listening to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio. We're going to take a break for these commercial messages from our sponsors at TogiNet.com. We're fortunate today to be talking with Dr. Raphael Rousseau, head of the Innovative Pediatric Drug Development Group at Genentech, an emerging leader for pediatric cancer research. Visit www.gene.com for more information about Genentech and the Innovative Pediatric Oncology Drug Development Group. Childhood Cancer Talk Radio is brought to you by Jack's Angels Foundation for Pediatric Brain Tumor Research and Advocacy for Children with Cancer. On the web at jacksangels.org. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Janet will be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
It's words you never heard.
So last night, my husband was laughing as he was reading about the differences between men and women. According to the article, men get single tusks or hiccups more often than women. Everyone knows that women are better at multitasking than men. I'm good at both multitasking and procrastinating, which means right now there are 28 things that I'm putting off until later. What's another word for a person who puts everything off until the last minute? A cunctator. Women blink nearly twice as much as men. And while men can read smaller print than women, women can hear better. In fact, when a woman says, "What?" she heard you. She's just giving you a chance to change what you said.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
You'll always have my shoulder when you cry.
Welcome back to more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Welcome back to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure on TogiNet.com. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, and today we are fortunate to be speaking with Dr. Raphael Rousseau, a pediatric oncohematologist by training. Raphael holds an MD from the University René Descartes and a PhD in therapeutic biotechnologies from the University Denis Diderot. He heads the iPODD team, or Innovative Pediatric Oncology Drug Development Team, with Genentech, a group of now 61 people dedicated to evaluating investigational medicines for pediatric indications. Visit www.gene.com for more information about Genentech and all of its activity. Dr. Rousseau, before the break, wonderful learning about these IMI2, the needs for preclinical assessment, for clinical trials to begin quickly for these kids. So really collaboration between entities and here in the U.S. and abroad is a big concern. Could you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Sure. So, for full disclosure, I also happen to be the chairman of the Industry Advisory Committee for Cure Search, which is a prominent pediatric oncology charity and advocacy group here in the United States. And so the first level of collaboration, I think, is within, goodwill between industry folks who do drug development in children. So that's one big area, is collaboration and prioritization in some ways amongst the different companies. And we're getting there. But very importantly as well, phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials about assessing the dose, the safety, and early efficacy of a new medicine. But ultimately, if we want those medicines to be available to the pediatric patients around the world, we need to have those medicines registered, what we call on-label, at the different health authorities agencies around the world. And for this, you need large number of patients through large phase 3 clinical trials, and those are very difficult to conduct in any single territory. I would say the U.S. is a large territory, Europe is another one, but they need to work together. And one example is for one of our recent monoclonal antibodies targeting B-cell malignancies, we conducted a 600 patients randomized trial in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, and this was through the collaboration of our academic partners. And I think it is also critical that academic partners partner together, despite maybe the slight academic competition that they may have. And it is critically important that not only industry but also academic partners collaborate together across boundaries. And that's true also for health authorities. The FDA is a prominent entity. We have also colleagues working at the European Medicines Agency, and they are working together already. And as an example, the iMATRIX trial that I just mentioned to you is being jointly reviewed, which is quite unique, by both agencies. So collaboration is a critical word, and I really want to emphasize that. And for parents who talk to academics and their physicians, to emphasize this point, and for those of them who also have contact in industry, to really emphasize the need for collaboration. That's to me the single most important driver for efficient clinical research in children with rare diseases, cancer and health, because the same is true for very rare genetic disorders. Collaboration is critical.
Do you think that the parameters or the appellation of the whole rare label, do you think that has any any chance of being modified? Because there's rare, like, a handful of folks on the earth at any one time. I know it means under 200,000 in incidents, but it seems sometimes like an industry excuse for not investigating something, and a lot of parents I know have had enough.
No, I certainly understand this frustration, and quite frankly, I agree with it. If it's used as an incentive, the orphan drug designation or the rare disease designation, if used as an incentive, I think is a great tool. If it's used to hide beyond your obligations, beyond your moral obligation, then it's wrong. So we've taken the view at Roche and Genentech that any medicine that we have that has a relevant mechanism of action for a pediatric disease should be developed regardless of the obligation or not. And so that's our approach, but I know it's not always shared by everybody. So maybe the regulation needs to evolve to sort of force the players to the table for discussions, and then we can go from there. So we'll see what the legislators will decide. Again, I think we're leaning towards more, our social responsibility and doing what's right beyond the regulation and going beyond the obligations and doing what's right for kids.
Well, it certainly hopes to have scientists, researchers like yourself emphasizing that point, and for advocates to keep saying that, because it's really all about that. I mean, that's what medicine is about in the first place. It's, do no harm and to help people. And so I think you're just, I think we all as human beings have gotten to this space where, okay, we need to get beyond our ego fears and the whole money thing, and we need to put people first. And I think it's just an extension of that, but it's absolutely an imperative one where it comes for our children with cancer, because they don't have a lot of time.
Exactly. At the same time, I also want to emphasize that, for large companies like ours, this is a significant investment to develop medicines for children, but we can certainly do it. I'm more concerned about, if changes in the regulation could also go the other way. If you become more coercive without adequate incentives, and I know this is difficult to hear because somehow pharma has been seen as, a moneymaker, but developing a medicine costs a lot of money, and before you can recoup on your investment, it can take many years. So my concern is for small biotechs, startups, which may ultimately be obliged, and they may be willing to do so, may not have the means to do it. Again, clinical trials are very expensive, and so we need also to be careful that in changing the regulation, it will be possible for small, medium, and large-size industry, pharmaceutical industries, to conduct those clinical trials. So we need to be also pragmatic and candid about this. Health has no cost, I would say, but it has a price. And so we need to be conscious that if we want to get access to those innovative compounds that sit in the portfolio of those very innovative startup companies, we need to help them to develop. And that's what we hope to do with the iMATRIX program, is to reduce the cost of development so that even small companies could volunteer until it becomes mandatory, but at least could volunteer and have, investments that do not get them belly up, because that would be too costly for them. So we have to think about this as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just grateful to you and your company. And I was reading up about Hoffmann-La Roche, which began 1896, and it seems like a familiar trend that's been in that company since the beginning. And I can't tell you how good that makes me feel. I don't. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but this was also the big reassuring point for me joining from academia to industry, is to realize how committed our senior leaders are. One of the board members of Hoffmann-La Roche is one of the founder family members, and I cannot tell you how supportive the family is. Beyond our immediate senior leaders who are physicians and scientists. I feel so proud to be part of a company that is so supportive of doing what's right for patients, and in particularly for children, of course. But it's I was talking about the dark side of the forest. Actually, it's also the light side of the forest, and I think we're all in together, and that's very reassuring for a physician, moving from academia to discover that it's really doing the right thing and doing what patients need next, and particularly for children.
That's fantastic. Well, it also helps academia, too, because oftentimes there isn't funding for this and that, and it's always a question of funding, and people have been told not to pursue this or that path because it would be, career suicide. I've heard that said before about pediatric brain tumor research, and this is very promising. It also seems promising for helping develop, on the biological research end, because I'm sure with iMATRIX, with these investigational medicines, and exploring these mechanisms, we need more biological information. So that's also extremely promising.
Exactly.
Are there any particular companies that have shown a desire to join in this effort on the biological research end?
Yeah, so this IMI2 consortium has several large pharmaceutical companies participating, big names of industry, and so that's already a very reassuring fact. And then on the iMATRIX trial itself, we've been discussing with several of our existing partners, because as it's in pharmaceutical development is a lot about combination, and so or co-development because of the cost, and so we've been able to use those connections to work with some of those companies and discuss joint pediatric drug development. So it's work in progress. I think a lot of people are watching us and looking at how successful we are before, investing more, and that's understandable. But I think we've achieved quite a lot in the past 2 years in getting the iMATRIX program up and running, getting patients to access in Europe and the United States, getting the agencies, health authorities to work together on this program. And so now we're starting to see colleagues from pharmaceutical industry raising interest in participating to the platform, or at least using its tool to implement their own programs. So, it's work in progress. But I want to reassure your listeners and parents in particular that I think more and more innovative medicines will be made available to children much earlier. I think they were made available, but at a restricted number of sites and pretty late in the life cycle, as we say, of the compound. This is changing. I think this is reassuring. It's never fast enough. It's never fast enough, but I think we're getting there.
Thank you so much for coming on today and giving us your words of hope, Doctor. That's all the time we have for today. I'm sorry we have to go. This is
Sure, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for your invitation.
That children with cancer and
we
their
hope you'll come
parents
back.
have a voice.
I will.